The market was loud, voices shouted from every corner. Creatures from many planets pushed and pulled, trying to see the next deal. Lights blinked above broken stalls. Dust hung in the air like fog. The slave auction had started. In the center, a raised metal platform stood. It was rusted, shaky. One by one, slaves were brought up and sold. Some were strong. Some were still young. Prices were high. The crowd fought to buy the best ones. Then the auctioneer laughed loudly. He clapped his long green hands and shouted, "Now this one! This one is special! So broken, we're starting at just 5 credits." The crowd turned. 2 guards dragged a thin woman onto the platform. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her legs shook. Her skin was pale, almost gray. A shock collar sat tight on her neck. Her long hair hung over her face, hiding her eyes. The auctioneer pointed. She used to be someone important. A rebel, maybe a queen, who knows, but look at her now, can't even stand straight. The crowd laughed. She's finished. Not worth 1 credit. I wouldn't take her for free. But someone was watching. A tall human man stood near the edge of the crowd. He wore a dark coat, his face hidden under a hood. His eyes were calm, sharp, and quiet. His name was Raiden, a former soldier who now walked alone. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He only watched the woman on the platform. The auctioneer tried again. 5 credits, that's almost free. Who wants her? No hands were raised. The woman didn't move. She stared at the floor, but her hands, they were clenched. She was still alive inside. Even if the world had forgotten her, Raiden stepped forward. "I'll take her," he said, his voice deep and clear. The market went silent. All eyes turned to the human. The auctioneer blinked. You? You want her? Raiden nodded. 5 credits right now. Someone in the crowd laughed. Humans always collect trash. Maybe he wants a pet. Another shouted. Raiden didn't respond. He walked up to the platform, dropped the 5 small metal chips on the table, and looked at the woman. She didn't look back. Her face was blank. "Unchain her," Raiden said. The guards unlocked her cuffs and collar. She fell forward. Weak and silent, Raiden caught her before she hit the ground. She was light, too light. Her body had been starving for weeks. He lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. But her fingers held his coat weakly, like part of her still didn't want to fall. Raiden walked out of the market, with her in his arms. Behind him, the crowd kept laughing. "She won't last a day. She's broken." What a waste of credits. But Raiden didn't look back. He walked through the dusty streets, far from the noise, until he reached his small camp on the edge of the city. The camp was simple: 1 tent, a heater, clean water, and a few supplies. It wasn't much, but it was safe. He laid her down on a soft blanket. She didn't speak. Her eyes stayed closed, her lips dry. Raiden took a clean cloth, soaked it in water, and wiped the dirt from her face. Slowly, her features appeared under the grime. There was beauty. Sharp cheekbones, soft skin, and a quiet pain in her eyes, even though they stayed shut. He opened a food pack, warmed it, and placed it near her. She didn't move. Then he spoke softly, more to himself than to her. "They saw trash," he said, looking at her face. "But I saw something else." Outside, the night came fast. The stars were sharp and cold in the sky. Inside the tent, Raiden sat quietly beside the sleeping woman. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't chain her. He just watched and waited. And the woman, in her sleep, moved her lips. 1 word. "Help." Raiden leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. That 1 word told him more than 1,000 screams. She was still in there. Somewhere deep inside, she was still fighting. He whispered back, "I will." The wind blew gently across the barren land as Raiden's boots crunched over dry sand. In his arms, the alien woman didn't stir. Her body was too weak. She was cold, thin, and silent like a forgotten ghost. But he held her carefully, as if she were made of glass. Raiden reached his shelter, a small metal cabin on the outskirts of the trade city. The building was old but clean. A solar panel hummed softly on the roof. The inside was warm, quiet, and peaceful. Not many dared to live this far out. But Raiden liked the silence. He placed her gently on the soft bed. Her arm slid to her side. Her face remained empty. Raiden looked at her for a long moment. She didn't move. She didn't open her eyes. He sighed, turned, and began heating water. He had no idea what species she was, but warmth and food worked on most living things does. The kettle whistled. He turned on the room's soft light. The glow touched her face. Now that the dirt was gone, her features were clearer, sharp, but delicate. There was a scar along her jaw. Her cheekbones were high. She looked like someone who once had strength and pride. He placed a cup of warm broth on a small table near the bed. "Drink when you're ready," he said quietly. He didn't expect an answer. The next morning, he heard a soft rustle. She had moved. Her eyes were open barely. She looked around, confused, then at him. No fear. "Just emptiness. You're safe," Raiden said. "No chains, no collars, no masters." She blinked slowly. Raiden placed the cup closer. "Eat, or you won't last another day." Her hand moved, shaky, weak, but she picked up the cup and drank slowly. Her eyes didn't leave his face. After she finished, she whispered, "Why?" Raiden leaned back in his chair. "Why what? Why?" "By me?" Raiden shrugged. "Because no one else would." "That's not a reason," she said. Her voice was dry and rough, like dust. Raiden looked into her eyes. "Maybe not, but it was enough." Later that day, news spread through the market. "Did you hear? That human really took her home. He must be mad. She's cursed, they say, a broken rebel. Not worth dirt." One merchant spat near Raiden's name. "Foolish human. Always trying to save what can't be saved." That night she sat up on the bed. Her strength was returning slowly. Raiden handed her a bowl of soup. She stared at it, then asked, "Do you even know my name?" "No," he said, "but I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She looked down. "It's Kelowna," Raiden nodded. "Kelowna? That's a strong name." She smiled for half a second, then stopped herself. "I was a captain. Long ago, I led my people in a rebellion. We lost." Raiden said nothing. He waited. "They called me dangerous, proud, too wild for a female. So they made an example out of me, sold me, beat me, broke me." She touched the scar on her jaw, piece by piece. "But they didn't finish the job," Raiden said. She blinked at him. "You're still here." "That means they failed." The next few days passed quietly. Raiden gave her space, but always brought her food, water, clean clothes. He never touched her without permission. Never asked for anything. One night she walked outside for the first time. The stars stretched above her like silver rivers. The desert air was cold, but she didn't shiver. Raiden stood beside her. "You're healing," he said. "I still feel like a ghost," she whispered. "Ghosts don't eat 3 bowls of soup in one day." She laughed, a soft, small sound. Her first real laugh in years. Later, when Raiden left to collect supplies, 2 traders from the city came by. They saw her sitting near the cabin door. One smirked. "So the human really took you in," the other sneered. "How's it feel to be the pity project of a human?" Kelowna stood up slowly. "I may be broken," she said, her voice low but clear, "but I'm not yours anymore." They laughed and left, but inside something had shifted. She felt it. A small flickering fire. That night, Raiden returned. She looked at him differently now. "You didn't buy me," she said. Raiden paused. "Didn't I?" She shook her head. "You rescued me." Raiden smiled softly. "I just saw someone worth saving." She looked down at her hands. "I'm still learning to believe that." "Take your time," Raiden said. "I'll be here." Outside, the desert wind moved the sand gently, like a quiet promise, and inside that small cabin, a woman who was once called broken had begun to feel whole again. The night was silent, but Kelowna's heart was loud. She stood near the door of Raiden's cabin. Her hand trembled on the handle. Cold winds slipped through the cracks, whispering doubts into her ears. Run. It had been days since the human brought her here. He fed her, gave her space, treated her like she mattered. He hadn't locked the door. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even asked her for her story. That scared her more than anything. Kindness was dangerous. She had learned that long ago. So tonight she decided to leave. She wore simple boots, wrapped her shoulders in a thin blanket, and carried nothing. She didn't want to steal. She just wanted to vanish. She opened the door slowly. It didn't creak. One step, two steps. The cool night air hit her skin like truth. She pulled the blanket tighter. The desert stretched ahead. Cold, quiet, endless. The stars blinked above her like silent watchers. She took a deep breath and stepped out, but then she stopped. A soft voice reached her ears. Coming from inside the cabin, she turned her head slightly. The door was still cracked open. Inside, Raiden sat near the small heater, alone. Facing the wall, he didn't know she could hear him, and what he said next made her freeze. "I don't know if she ever trusts me," Raiden whispered. His voice was calm but tired. "I don't blame her. I wouldn't trust me either," he sighed. It wasn't a heavy sigh. It was the kind that carried sadness, not frustration. I just saw something in her eyes. Even when they were empty, there was something. Kelena stood still, not breathing, not blinking. "I've seen real monsters," Raiden continued. "I fought them, killed them, but she wasn't one. She was broken. Not evil, not dangerous." He paused. "I didn't buy her to feel like a hero. I just couldn't leave her there, not in that place, not surrounded by laughter." Kelena's hand loosened on the blanket. I told myself I wouldn't care, that I'd drop her off at the next outpost. But every time she looks at me, I see someone who was once a storm, and maybe she still is. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Maybe she'd leave tonight. Maybe she already has." His voice dropped even softer now. "But I hope she stays." Kelena's legs felt weak. Her feet didn't move. Her throat was tight, as if words were trying to rise, but had forgotten how to know. One had ever spoken about her like that, not even when she was free. She looked out at the desert again. It was dark, empty, cold. Then she looked back at the open door. Warm light. A heater, a cup of soup still sitting on the table. A man who believed she was more than broken. She turned around and stepped back inside. Raiden didn't look up when she entered. He heard her footsteps. He knew. She stood by the door for a long moment, then walked slowly to the heater. "I didn't leave," she said softly. "I know," Raiden replied. Silence passed between them. Not awkward. Just still. "I heard you," she said. Ryden finally looked at her. "I know that too." Kelena sat down beside him, not close but not far. "No one ever said I was a storm," she whispered. "You were," Raiden said. "You still are." She looked at the soup on the table. "Cold now. I can heat it again." "No," she said. "Let it stay like this. I want to remember it this way." Raiden nodded. That night she didn't sleep in the bed. She sat by the heater, wrapped in the blanket, eyes open. She didn't need to run. She didn't need to hide. For the first time in years she felt seen. Not as a tool, not as a slave, not as a memory. As a person. The next morning, the sun rose over the desert, painting the sand with gold. Raiden stepped outside and found Kelena already awake, standing barefoot in the soft dirt. "I want to learn," she said. "Learn what?" "How to fight again, how to stand, how to be more than what they made me." Raiden didn't smile. He just nodded. "We'll start tomorrow." Kelena looked at him. "No," she said. "We'll start now." The sun burned gently over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand. Kelena stood barefoot, sweat on her forehead, fists clenched. Her legs shook from exhaustion. Raiden stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her carefully, not as a soldier, but as a guide. "Again," he said. She groaned but raised her arms. Her stance was wrong, her movements slow, but her eyes were alive. "Don't hold your breath," Raiden reminded her. "Breathe with your movement." She threw another punch, clumsy, but with force. He nodded. "Better." They trained every morning now. The days started with stretches, then balance drills, and finally short rounds of sparring. Kelena struggled, but she never gave up that afternoon. Raiden brought out a fresh shirt and handed it to her. "This one won't rip so easily," he said. She looked down at the old shirt she wore. It was thin, soaked with sweat, torn at the sides. She hesitated. "Do you want me to turn around?" he asked. Kelena gave a small, quick nod. Raiden stepped outside the cabin and waited. Inside, Kelena slowly peeled off the shirt. The air touched her skin and the silence suddenly grew heavy. She stood still for a moment, staring at her reflection in the mirror beside the heater. Her back. It wasn't just marked, it was a map of pain. Long, deep scars crossed from her shoulders to her waist. Burns, whips, old wounds that never fully healed, each one a memory. Each one a story she never wanted to tell. She touched one with her fingers. It was jagged like lightning. That one had come from the electric rods they used in the pit. She looked down. Her ribs showed. Her arms were thin. But something had changed. Her eyes were no longer dull. She slowly pulled on the new shirt and stepped outside. Raiden looked at her but said nothing. He had seen the scars when she walked by. He didn't flinch. He didn't stare. He simply said, "It fits." That night she sat by the fire. "I was captured in winter," she said suddenly. Raiden looked over. They came during the night. My camp was sleeping. We had just lost a battle. I told my people to run. I stayed behind. She paused. They said I was brave. But I wasn't. I was just tired. Raiden didn't interrupt. They dragged me across the ice, shackled me, cut my hair, burned my symbol off my skin. She pulled back her sleeve to show a circle-shaped scar. It used to be the mark of her clan. Now it was just pink flesh. They made me fight other prisoners for food. For fun, sometimes just to bleed. She looked into the fire. Eventually, I stopped screaming. That's when they started calling me the ghost. Raiden's voice was soft. But you're not a ghost. She looked at him, eyes filled with old hurt. Then what am I? Raiden met her gaze. You're someone still standing. The next day, Kelena trained harder. Her punches were sharper, her footing more stable. Raiden adjusted her arms, corrected her angle. She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch when he came close. She was changing, not fast, but surely. In the evening, she cooked something simple: roasted root slices and warm broth. It was her idea. She insisted. I remember this dish from my home, she said. We used to eat it after long march. Raiden tasted it and nodded. Tastes like firewood and victory. Kelena smirked. That's the idea. They sat in silence for a while. Then Kelena asked quietly, Do you have scars? Raiden paused, then rolled up his sleeve. A deep scar ran across his bicep. Plasma blade, he said. I pulled. A friend out of a wreck? Didn't move fast enough? Kelena reached out, lightly touched it with her finger. You survived. He looked at her. So did you? That night, she stood by the mirror again. This time, she didn't stare at the scars in shame. She touched them and whispered, I'm still here. Not broken, not gone, just healing. The same market that once laughed at her now went quiet when she passed. Kelena walked with her head high. Her back was straight. Her new cloak blew gently behind her, the same color as desert stone. Beside her, Raiden walked calmly, hand resting. Near the blaster on his hip, not in fear, just out of habit. No chains. No collar. No auction. This time, she came on her own 2 feet. Whispers followed them like shadows. That's her. She's supposed to be dead. The broken girl. She looks different. A merchant dropped his glass when she looked him in the eye. He remembered laughing at her price, just 5 credits. He remembered calling her garbage. Now, her eyes were sharp, focused, alive. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The market remembered every word it once threw at her. And now, it trembled with silence. A group of guards stood near the auction platform, the same place she was once dragged and displayed like trash. One of them stepped forward. You can't walk through here like this, he barked. Kelena stopped. She looked at his badge. You weren't here last time, she said quietly. You didn't laugh. The guard blinked. What? Raiden stepped beside her, his voice calm. She's not looking for a fight. Kelena nodded. But I'll finish one if it starts. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. They reached the center of the market. Kelena stood where she once fell. She could almost hear the laughter again, see the faces, smell the dirt and rust. Her fingers twitched. Raiden watched her closely. You don't have to stay long. I know, she said. But I need this. She closed her eyes for a second, breathing in deeply. The sun touched her skin. Her mind went back to the moment she was lifted from the dirt when the world gave up on her and a single human said, I'll take her. She opened her eyes. No one laughed now. Suddenly from the crowd, a loud voice shouted, You have no right to be here. Kelena turned slowly. A slaver pushed through the people. He was tall, with scars on his face and gold rings in his ears. His name was Varn, and he used to own her. I remember you, Kelena said softly. Varn growled. I paid for you. You were mine. She's not yours anymore, Raiden said firmly. She was broken. Varn snapped. I should have killed her when I had the chance. Kelena stepped forward. Then try now. The crowd gasped. Varn reached for his shock stick, but Raiden moved faster. In one smooth motion, he pulled his blaster and aimed. Try it, Raiden said, voice cold. Varn froze. His hand stayed near his weapon, trembling slightly. She's not the one chained anymore, Raiden added. So if you want to test that, you better be sure. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Varn stepped back. This isn't over, he hissed. Kelena gave him a look colder than ice. No, it ended the day you sold me like trash. The crowd parted as the two walked through. No one mocked her now. No one laughed. Many lowered their heads. Some even nodded silent respect, given without words. Back at the edge of the market, a small alien girl tugged on Kelena's cloak. Kelena turned. The girl held out a small flower, dry but bright orange. Her eyes were wide. My mother said you were once a warrior. Kelena knelt slowly. I still am, she said gently. The girl placed the flower in her hand. Then you should have this, Kelena smiled. For the first time, it was full. Thank you, she whispered. Back at the cabin. She placed the flower in a small cup beside her bed. Raiden handed her a drink and sat down across from her. You didn't have to face that market, he said. I did, Kelena replied. I needed to see it. I needed it to see me, Raiden nodded. They'll remember you now. Kelena looked at him. Not as the broken girl. No, he said. As the storm that came back. Later that night she stood outside under the stars. The wind blew softly across the sand. She whispered to the sky. I was once sold for 5 credits. But now they wouldn't dare put a price on me. Behind her, Raiden stepped out. What next? He asked. Kelena turned, her eyes shining. We find others like me, and we remind them they're not broken. Raiden smiled. I like that plan. The desert wind had changed. It no longer carried whispers of pain, but the voice of a woman who had once been lost. Kelena now walked with purpose. She was no longer hiding in shadows or shaking in fear. The woman who had been dragged, mocked, and sold for 5 credits was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone stronger. Reborn. She spent her mornings training harder than before. Raiden watched her from a distance, offering quiet guidance when needed. But she no longer needed help standing. Her hands were steady, her movements sharp. One morning, as the sun rose behind her, she struck the training post with such force that it cracked. Raiden raised an eyebrow. That post didn't insult you, Kelena grinned. It looked like Varn. They both laughed, a rare sound, but one that came easier now. Word of her return spread like wildfire. Stories traveled from market to mine, from shipyard to slum. Did you hear? The broken one is back. She stood up to her old master. She's training others now. They say she protects runaways. And it was true. Kelena began meeting others, young slaves, wounded veterans, castaways forgotten by their own kind. She didn't promise them miracles. She didn't speak like a leader. She just listened. And when someone said, I'm too weak, she answered. So was I. One evening, a group of frightened girls arrived at the edge of Raiden's camp. Their clothes were torn. Their faces were dirty. They said a traitor had dumped them in the desert after deciding they weren't useful. Kelena brought them water, food, blankets. Then she sat beside them and asked softly, Do you know how much I was sold for? They shook their heads. 5 credits. Their eyes widened. but I wasn't trash, and neither are you. The youngest girl, barely old enough to speak clearly, whispered, "Are you a warrior?" Kelena looked into the fire, then smiled. "No, I'm a survivor." Raiden watched from a distance. He remembered the first time he saw her silent, broken, barely able to walk. Now, she stood taller than anyone around her. Not just in strength, but in spirit. One night as they cleaned up, after a meal, he spoke, "You've changed everything." Kelena looked at him. "No," she said, "you started it." "I just remembered who I was," Raiden chuckled. "And now?" She looked at the small camp once quiet, now filled with people like her. "I remember who I'm meant to become." But not everyone was happy about her rise from deep in the trade city. A cold message was sent out to bounty hunters, slavers, mercenaries. A price was put on her head. Target, Kelena, once known as the Ghost. Status, threat. Reward, 20,000 credits. When Raiden read the alert, he said nothing at first. Kelena stood behind him. She had seen it too. "They're scared," she said. Raiden turned. "You should hide for a while." She shook her head. "I just found my voice. I'm not losing it again." So she prepared, she trained harder, taught others, built watch posts near the camp, taught the girls how to fight not with hate, but with purpose. She didn't build an army, she built a family, and they stood together. One night, she climbed the highest hill near the camp. Raiden followed her, carrying a small lantern. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, he asked, "Are you afraid?" Kelena didn't answer right away. "I used to be," she said. "Every second, every night. I thought I'd never be whole again." She looked at him. "But now? No, I'm not afraid of them." Raiden smiled gently. "They should be afraid of you," Kelena chuckled. "They're afraid of what I represent." "What's that?" She looked at the dark horizon. "Hope?" As they walked down the hill, the camp behind them lit up slowly, small fires glowing in the night, voices singing softly. Kelena stopped and looked back. Once this world had crushed her. Now, she was helping others rise. She wasn't broken anymore. She was reborn. The sky above the desert burned red as the sun set behind the distant hills. Wind carried dust across the camp, but no one hid. They stood in silence, waiting. Tonight wasn't just any night. The threat had arrived, and Kelena stood at the front, her cloak flowing like a battle flag. She no longer looked like the woman who was sold for 5 credits. She looked like a leader, a storm wrapped in flesh and purpose. Raiden stood beside her, calm and ready. Around them, former slaves, orphans, runaways, and wounded fighters held what? Weapons they could? Their hands trembled, but not from fear, from readiness. A scout ran down the slope. "They're here," he said, breathing hard. 3 speed cruisers, about 20 mercs, all armed. Raiden looked at Kelena. "Last chance to run?" she smirked. "We've been running our whole lives. Tonight we stand." Raiden nodded. "Then let's give them a story they'll never forget." The mercenaries came in fast hoverbikes roaring, guns glowing with plasma. Dust shot up behind them like fire. But when they reached the camp, something unexpected happened. No one screamed. No one begged. No one knelt. They stood, side by side, with Kelena at the front and moving, unshaken. One of the mercs laughed. "This is the army?" "A bunch of broken toys." Kelena stepped forward. "We were broken, not anymore." The merc lifted his blaster, but before he could fire, a stone hit his hand. A child had thrown it. The merc turned, enraged, but then another stone flew, then another, then the people charged. The battle was not perfect. Some fell, some bled, but Kelena moved like lightning, dodging, striking, shouting orders. She fought not like someone protecting herself, but like someone protecting a future. Raiden fought too quiet and deadly, never far from her side. It'd take long. The mercs weren't ready for this, for the fury of people who had nothing left to lose and everything to live for. They retreated fast, limping, bleeding into the dunes. One shouted over his shoulder, "She's not worth 20,000. She's worth a damn war." When the dust settled, the camp stood still. Then, cheering. Crying. Laughing. Kale single quotes. Didn't speak. She walked among the people, checking wounds, helping those who fell, lifting others to their feet. She didn't act like a hero, she acted like someone who remembered what it felt like to be on the ground. Later that night she sat by the fire. Her clothes were torn, her hands dirty. But her eyes, they glowed with something deeper than victory. Raiden sat beside her, handing her a water bottle. You know, he said, I think they'll be telling this story for a long time. Kelena smiled faintly. Which part? The 5 credits? Or the part where I punched a bounty hunter off his bike? Both. They sat in silence, listening to laughter in the distance. Children ran between tents. Someone played soft music. The stars blinked above. Finally, Kelena asked, Why did you really buy me that day? Raiden looked into the fire. Because you look like someone the world gave up on. And I hate when the world does that. She nodded slowly. Thank you for not walking away. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I didn't buy you, Kelena. I bought a story. She turned to him. A story? Raiden nodded. One the galaxy needs. One where a woman was sold for 5 credits, but became priceless. A few days later, something strange appeared in the middle of the market. A statue. No one knew who made it. No one saw it arrive. It showed a woman standing tall, 1 foot on broken chains, cloak blowing behind her. At the base, in simple letters, were the words, They called her broken, they sold her for 5 credits, but she became a legend. Years passed. Kelena's name became a symbol of strength across planets. Where she once begged for freedom, others now found hope. She helped build shelters, train fighters, and rescue the forgotten, but she never forgot where it began. In a dusty market, on a rusty stage. With one human who said, I'll take her. And in every version of the story, when children asked, How much was she worth? The answer was always the same, more than they could ever afford.